All right. Well, welcome to the second week of AIST3720. For some reason, the video I recorded during class got corrupt or something, so I'm recording this now Wednesday instead of Tuesday, so we can all keep up. As always, the place to go for what to do and what's happening is go to the agenda, and it should kind of go to the week that we're in. You can always scroll up and get the stuff from last week if you need it. All right, so just from the top, next Monday really doesn't affect us, but there's no classes as we honor Martin Luther King. Another shovel full of assignments going on. On these notes for professionals, I would do them. I can't link directly, say, to Chapter 1. If you go to Linux Notes for Professionals, there's an outline. You could download that book, and I might if you're going to do much with Linux, but let's see, I thought there was a way to get the get just the chapters, and I guess you can kind of read it here on this screen. It's easier to maybe download the PDF book and open that. And I might even save it. Yeah, that's a lot easier to work with, and that'll work in your browser. But just especially for Linux, it's all more about the command line, and we may be much more used to a GUI type interface. So please, read those. It's background. It might come up in a quiz, but it'll actually make you a little more productive, and you'll get done quicker. Some more of that. The videos online. And and begin reading this introduction and concepts anyway. That's reading assignment, and I'm assuming you're doing it. And we have a tech prac due in a couple of weeks. Well, about now a week and a half, 2 weeks from last Sunday. All right. Well, I'm recording this video right now, and so I put my notes out there. It's kind of like a checklist. I have graded through Tech Prac 00, so if something doesn't look right in your grade, go look for the comments, and let me know of issues or errors, and if something that you couldn't quite get, we can maybe round back and look at it again. But you need to alert me, and kind of quickly, if that's the situation. One thing, if you run into questions or issues while you're completing a Tech Prac, don't put in the Tech Prac itself, the delivery or the comments or hidden in a document about, this didn't make sense. That's not a good place for questions. When I'm looking at Tech Prac, might be well after. Sometimes I wait a whole week before I get around to doing it. Reach out right away. With an email or something in, maybe Teams message here, I couldn't get this, or I didn't know what to do for part 3, or it didn't make sense. Can you help? Typing it into explanations into D2L is really just the wrong place, the wrong time. I'm kind of in grading mode, putting points in, getting all that done. It's not really the time for me to pivot and try to troubleshoot, like the troubleshooting. That's actually, it's a little bit fun. It's where a lot of learning and development takes place, but it's not the good place. D2L isn't the place for that. Okay, so just reach out and we can figure it out. In Tech Prac 1, and I think every Tech Prac from here on in, one of the problems is actually a quiz that you take. And so I put it here in announcements, so it's not a surprise. I think you've done enough D2L quizzes that I won't demonstrate how that goes. And this one happens to be, if you look at the preview, it tells you where we're getting it. So this is that introduction chapter. You have 25 minutes. There's 25 questions. I think I show you the questions you got wrong, so you get another go back. Students usually get 20 to 25 on these. Not a lot of drama. But just kind of wanted you to realize it was there, kind of a little bit of a curve from Tech Prac 1. And so that was just a comment I wanted to do. We can kind of put that and put that to bed, just out of the thing. Quiz 1. Tomorrow, Thursday, and actually next week on the 20th, I'm not going to come in with kind of a lecture in the face-to-face class. I'm just going to be there as guide on the side, helping VMs to be built. So if you're in the face-to-face class, please come if you have questions, but bring your device, and or if you're going to use campus equipment or you have a desktop that you can't tote in, bring a portable hard drive and we can get your VMs up and going. I invite you, if you're in the online class and you can make it to the GCC, 1 to 2:15, in 2300, come on and we can help there, or request to Zoom in. But I'm just sort of saying it's not going to be anything where I formally deliver a lecture. I'm just going to say, do you have any questions? We are going to be building VMs, virtual machines. And so you can think of a virtual machine as a second computer that shares your hardware resources that's on your box to, and it's not emulate, but just to physically instantiate is a better word, another VM. And VM, what manages a VM, the software that does that is called a hypervisor. There's two kinds of hypervisors. They call them type 1 and type 2. VMware and VirtualBox are type 2 hypervisors. They're programs that you install within an operating system, and they manage the VMs for you. So there's that kind of software. The operating system, Windows 10 in my case, just says, okay, there's this program called VMware that's doing stuff, and it's just like another program in the system. A type 1 hypervisor is where the entire operating system doesn't do anything except run VMs. Microsoft's Hyper-V is an example, and I think VMware Sphere is an example, and in those cases, there really is no innate operating system. If you have some capabilities, it's because you have a VM running. It's a distinction we really don't need to worry about, but that's what a hypervisor is. And you can use whatever hypervisor you want, but if you're going to really ask me for help, try to stick with VMware. I can maybe help with other things, but it just gets to, that I may not know, or may not know quickly. I didn't see anybody, I'm now looking at this, that had an Apple that had an M1 chip when I looked at your My PC specs, but I might not have looked close. So if you're there, and here's how to check, please just contact me. I'm trying to see who's there and what we're going to do. We just have to do things a little different with our virtualization. If you have an Apple Mac and you don't have another choice of a computer, it's a good chip, and it's it's the latest, got lots of positive things. One of the things they won't really do is emulate sort of this x86, or well, you can emulate it with a different hypervisor type program, but it won't virtualize an x86 architecture. Okay. Now, the main thing that you need to be doing this week is getting your materials together for your VMs and then building them. Okay. So I've got a couple of, or 2 guides and 2 follow-ups out here in the agenda that walk through step-by-step how to build these VMs. You're going to build an Ubuntu VM and a Windows Server VM. But, how about getting your materials together? Search your emails. And you should have an email from noreply@kavuto.com that tells you how to register for On the Hub. On the Hub is, they distribute software. I could have signed in earlier. And once you register, you'll know how to log in. You'll probably use your Ad Augusta credentials. I've kind of got a older one where it goes a little different, but at On the Hub, you'll use students, and one of the tabs there is VMware. If you're on a PC, you want to download Workstation, VMware Workstation, not the player. The player, and there's a Fusion. Fusion is what you download on a Mac and install. And oh, by the way, there is some help out there. Thought I had some help. I should maybe put the links. I will put the links in there. And I'll put the links, but how to install VMware Fusion on a Mac and on a PC, but I don't see where I've made the links to those. So I will add that to the agenda, and it works. But let's get back here to On the Hub. This is going to be not so much a download. You kind of click this and select the product and put it in your cart and check out. There will be no cost. You have a year license for this, but after you've checked out, or when you're checking out, I am just going to, you can always view the invoice, I want to take one of mine. I don't want to show you my real key. Wait a minute, that's not. What I wanted, or is it maybe view details? I thought that would do it. It's view details. I'm sorry. It's when you click on view details, that's where you get the ability to download it. So if you miss that going past, then when you click that, it will download the software. As I say, don't use these keys. That's they're expired. But this is where you get your serial number for the product you're installing, whether it's Fusion or VMware Workstation. And it's going to want that during the install. And so if you forgot to get it, then just go back into On the Hub and go look at the details for your order. And that's where you'll find the serial numbers to install VMware. All right. And I will get those links to the installs out in the agenda to be I'll put them up here. And great. You're also going to need to get the install materials for Ubuntu and Windows Server. And this one is just kind of, I've got a direct link. We're going to use, or I recommend you use not the latest version of Ubuntu. If you want to get the latest version of Ubuntu, that's fine. There were just some little glitches with the 20 and on versions with VMware that happens sometimes, and they were a little hard to troubleshoot. But this one's a little more reliable and has everything we need. When you click on that, you're just going to get this, same old kind of, download thing. I recommend you save as, and I've already downloaded it, so we don't need to do, and I have in, I made a folder called AIST3720 installs, part of my documents, and I just parked it there for safe keeping. And so get that and just have it. One thing about these ISOs, or what an ISO is, and you can have one for Windows Server as well, and later on the database management system SQL server. An ISO is the image that is from, say, a DVD, that if you had a DVD drive, you could install it, and so there's like this image that has the files. You can double click an ISO, and what Windows 10 will do by default and automatically, unless you've set something else, is mount it as a virtual DVD drive. So I don't really have any DVD drives, and I've got my, got a couple of these things in. What you don't need to mount it. I'm doing that by demonstration. You kind of don't want to. You don't want to fiddle around in here and install from this, especially on the Windows Server one. So I'm right-clicking on both of these guys and ejecting, but just explaining what an ISO is. It's the image that would go on a, I guess I got rid of my, where I was showing you all those installs. All right, so you get the Ubuntu one. For Windows Server, you're going to get that from the Azure portal. The way to get started, and you might have to register the first time. I've already registered, so it's going to bypass, but you use the use that link. Always use your At Augusta Edu credentials. I've kind of already logged in and like that, and it should get you to here. If you don't end up on the education page, like where you get to overview, if you're in the portal, you can always just look for education. And here on the overview page, you might have a link here that says something like activate your Azure credits. I would hold off on that. We're going to do that. The later you activate them, the further you have into next year, to where they, you'll get $100 a year while you're a student. I've been practicing with mine, so we don't need to activate or do Azure credits right now. But in this Azure portal is where you can get access to software that you have for free. And so if you click down to the software and go Windows Server, and I'll even go as far as 2019. They've got a new version out, and I don't know if it'll be any different. I wouldn't mess with it yet. It's probably just going to be just the same as everything we're doing. But get the 2019, and I'm recommending or suggesting you get the data center version. So when you click on this, then over to the side, you have a way to download that, and you also have a way to view the key. All right, and so I'm not going to view key because I don't want you using my key. I think you get 2 or 3 installs from the same key. I might have used them all up. What I might do is put them in a notepad, a text file that just has the keys. One thing, if you use this Windows Explorer, File Explorer on Windows, I recommend that in View that you choose file name extensions so you see the actual extension. As a default, it looks like this, and it tries to help you with what kind of document it is. The real name for this file is windsurfkeys.txt, and I really like to know that. If you're getting files where you have like double extensions and you don't know why, it's probably because you renamed it here, right? Without this, and I said, oh, name your file windsurfkeys.txt. It really is already named that. It just doesn't show it. I don't like hiding file extensions, and I don't think it's a good default. I also show hidden items, but that's not a big thing. But anyway, you download and you get your Windows Server installed and get that key so you can activate Windows. And if you forget, you can always go back and view key. Oh, by the way, the same download that installs Windows Server Data Center also installs Windows Server Standard. And you choose the product when you're going through the install. If you get the different version, you can always come, and I might even do it while I'm here. It turns out to be a different key for Standard than for Data Center, and I might get both keys. It doesn't really matter which one you install. We're not using it so intensively. There's going to be a difference, but then you'd have the key for when you need it. All right, so there's that one critical alert for Windows. Do not do what I'm going to show you on a PC installing Windows Server. I've had students, and it seems to come and go. I haven't had it for maybe a year, but about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, I had 3 students in the class wipe out their system on their PC with the Windows Server install. And you can do that. You can overwrite, but you don't want to do that. So here's what not to do. That is, I have this ISO, so I double click it because I'm just used to when I double click files, it tells me what to do. Oh, and now that I've double clicked it, I see setup exe. And what I do is I click on setup exe because I'm supposed to install Windows Server. You are supposed to install Windows Server, but you're supposed to do it in a virtual machine, not clobber your own computer with it. So if I double click this, it's going to start me down the road of overwriting my Windows 10 that I've got here with the Windows Server. And if you say yes to all that, I'll leave that. I got that reason to come back to the notepad. It will do that. What do you want to do instead? You want to do what it says in this guide here. And in fact, I have this alert again, trying to demonstrate what not to do. You don't just double click and mount that thing and then have it go. All right. Not going to really demo the building the VMs. It's a time consuming thing, and I have guides. Okay, so if you're looking for a video guidance on how to install Ubuntu VM on a PC with VMware, well, I've got that. I've got it, how to do it on a Mac with the supporting video, but also step by step, kind of showing what it happens at every step of the way. I do want to highlight a couple of things, though, about that just by using these screen caps. You basically point to your install material. This is how it looks on a Mac, and this is how it looks on a PC. As you go through the process, this is a Linux install. It's going to ask for the Mojo root administrator login ID, which they call username, and the full name. So I would use your actual real full name, and for username, it has to be all lowercase. Use your email before the @AugustaEdu. Okay, please, that just helps me help keep track of you. And making up a password, there's different password rules on different systems, and you can always get in the system, your administrator, and change the password rules, but you can't do that the first time in. So a password. I'm not saying I'd necessarily recommend it, but something that will always work whenever you need it in Windows and in Ubuntu is this capital P little w4 AIST3720 exclamation point. And that's really the ones I just use. So I don't have to sort of remember, but you can make up your own passwords, see what works, write them down, change them later. It maybe saves a little bit of confusion. In real life, it's not a good idea to use the same password here, there, and everywhere. In this case, these VMs are living, kind of in our on our computer. Nobody can really get to them and start them up, and so I'm not too worried about having. It's a strong password, but effective password protection. That they figured out my Ubuntu password. Now they can get into my Windows server, and like that. And so as you walk through. When you create your virtual machines, those are going to get stored somewhere. As a default, it'll be in a folder called Virtual Machines down within your documents. So, and I've got lots of virtual machines. The kind of the fun thing about virtualization is I have a Windows Surface running Win 10, but I can run a Mac Big Sur here. I can run a Windows Home version, even though I have Enterprise. I can run a Chrome OS. I can run Android, not sort of the front end phone, but the back end Android command line, and work with those operating systems without having to get on a different device. So that's virtualization. But it's going to store these things. You're going to do this, create this LS1. Realize that it's going to put a bunch of files out there, including probably the biggest file is the this virtual hard disk that might get split up. And so it's going to need some space. There's some guidelines in here about local VM hosting, what it needs to be able to host a VM. So there's that link and how much space you ought to have, and 25 plus to hold a Windows server, 15 plus for a Linux VM. So if you're getting low on disk space, then maybe a portable hard drive, or if you have 2 disks, use your D drive instead of your C drive for that. And so that is, I'm trying to think of anything else. Naming. I've asked you to name your VMs internally, the host name, something like the first 4 characters of your login at campus, and then LS1 for Linux server first, and WS1 for Windows server first. This doesn't create your host name, but it's kind of convenient for your system to be named the way you asked. And what that does is when you do it that way, let me go up a level, it'll make a folder wherever you're doing it with that name, and then all the files associated with that VM also begin with that name, and it kind of helps you to keep track of what's going on. You'll have to define a disk size and some other things. The video kind of talks through that, but when you go kind of through create, it'll go through a create process, and you'll end up with a virtual machine that kind of the videos show you how they work. Maybe I'll start one up very shortly. Similar on Windows Server. Okay. After the don't do this, it's walking you through the build. You point to your installer. It asks for the Windows key here. I found it better to activate Windows later. When I put the key in there, it seems to confuse the installer and kind of says invalid key. In the Windows, I kind of hate this. It says full name. Please put just your login, no spaces. You kind of foul yourself up if you have spaces in the full name. This is really the login ID, not the full name. And then the password for that login ID. So I think that it'll warn you that you didn't do a product key, and great. It will activate Windows later. Similar kind of thing. It's going to put it here. It's got a name, a little bit more storage capacity for the Windows server, and then it goes through the Windows install process. Okay. Kind of note that after you install, if you have got this first steps on a Linux server, please do them. And first steps on a Windows server, please do those. If you look in TechPrac 1, I say create your VM and then apply the guide this, okay? Something that if there's problem, if there's an issue that comes up every term is a few students will just overlook doing that. One of the biggest things that happens in the first steps, and this is now in Linux, it's giving your computer a host name. Some of this applying updates, setting updates to manual, I highly recommend. It just gets confusing if you don't. You get into trouble and you get packages that are stranded out there, and we have to clean them out because the GUI is trying to manage your downloads, and we like to manage our downloads the old-fashioned way like that, and our updates, our downloads and updates. I'd recommend you set your time zone. Just when you created a file, I think it defaults to Pacific time. But one thing that you have to do, or otherwise you get a few points off, the host name for your computer in Linux starts off Ubuntu. I want you to change that host name to be the same as the name we gave to the computer, and that would be the way that that computer would be found on the network and things like that. So that's an important thing to do. There's a command to get to that. The sudo in front just gives you admin privilege for the command, and that's kind of covered in the reading and on like that. Similar in Windows Server, first steps, kind of same thing. We're setting time zone manual updates. As a default, the computer name is Win in this thing. You have option 2 to change the computer name. So when you go to 2, you can put this in, but you'll need to restart. But don't put TSCH, put in your four characters so your host has a particular name. And sometimes this is how I tell it was actually you that did the thing. And so you show me the screen caps, and I can be sure it's your computer because the host name is right. All right. So I kind of have gone from the agenda. I didn't demo anything on really demo, but these guides are demos built in, and what I did was talk you through the guides. I want to take just a moment while I got you all here to talk about. I think creating servers is pretty straightforward. There's just a guide. I don't have a video for it. I didn't think it really necessary, but you're going to add some users. Did I put server shell comments? Yeah, it's just a guide, but it tells you that's easy enough. The thing that it doesn't trip people up, but this work with the file system, you're going to work at the command line, getting some things done in the command line in Windows, and then the terminal in Linux, moving among directories, creating files. This video shows it to you in detail. Every command you need to do this is in there. It's not completely just, type this, but it's mostly there. A couple of things that I want to do, and you're doing parallel stuff in Linux and Windows. The ones that throw students a little bit is is kind of getting this creating a file from the command line, and then later moving a directory. Let me get to the command line and just do that. So I got to the command prompt. What you should know about Windows is the way it organizes its drive is that on the C drive, it's got file for programs and program data, but users, there's a folder called users, and every user has a folder within there or a directory, and within that users folder are folders for documents and etc. Works the same thing in Linux, at least Linux when it has a GUI or some of the widgets, and so the documents that I get over here, or if I do dir here, this documents that I see here is going to be the same thing as what I see here in the GUI, but we need to do things from the command line. All right. Oh, and I guess maybe in I don't need the quote marks there. You might need the quote marks in Linux. So there's an echo command, and what the echo command does is whatever follows it on the line is echoed back to the console. And that's handy. Why would I ever do that? Just sitting there. Well, if it's a line in a script to make a prompt or something, then that's a good kind of thing. But we can use that command, and there's lots of ways to create a file. But we can use redirection to say, oh, take the output, and you can use redirection on any command, take the output of the command and put it in this file that I call demo text. And so if I type demo text now, you can see that, oh, it just contains this particular line. So how do I create a file from the command line? What I'm not talking about in Windows is, oh, well, I go get Notepad, or in Linux, Ubuntu desktop with the desktop gedit, and then it wakes up a GUI program that, oh, I type it in, and then I do file save. No, we want the file to be created entirely from the command line. And that's how it works. And this just redirects. And you can redirect to a printer if you have one, or another computer, anything like that. It turns out that, oh, by the way, when you hit your up arrow, it brings up your last command. The double arrows append. I didn't want Notepad, I wanted to type. There it is. So when I said this is more stuff, arrow, or great, it actually appended to what was already there. The single arrow, and I'm just trying to make it something different. The single greater than clobbers what's there and starts a file new with whatever you had, right? So that's kind of creating a file from the command line. I think in Linux, and it's in the video, I think you might have to put this in double quotes to get it to work, because it looks then at this single quote and says, gee, I think you're quoting something, and I never see the quote that comes after. So in Linux, you might need to, echo with the quotes, but redirect it into demo text. All right, so that's one idea. Another thing that, again, when I say throw students, maybe there'd be 5 in a class our size who don't do that, not show all files. You ought to be able to figure out, just kind of remember the current directory and move to the root folder. So I am in this folder now called users TASCH. In Linux, it would be in / home and whatever the name of the login is, whatever you make it when you create it. There's a CD command, and CD in Windows / moves me up to the root folder. And you can see the prompt is reminding me what folder I am in, and I can now see the directory of the root of the C drive. Well, that's all great. What if I wanted to get back to where I started? Okay. Well, I could look there and I could use this change directory and get back into users. By the way, Windows is case insensitive, so I can do users TASCH without worrying about casing, and it will get me back there. Linux, not so much. With Linux, what did I do? CD. Users, this is a different animal than this, and you could have them both in your file system. So a little something to get used to. If kind of Linux is saying, oh, I can't find this file, something invalid file name, maybe check your casing. But in case I'd like to remember this, or not even remember it myself, have the system remember it, the command, and it's the same in Linux, is push D. When I push D and go to /, well, it changes up to the C drive, or the root of the C drive, the root folder of the C drive. But when I want to get back to where I was, I don't have to remember that name. I can just do pop D for pop directory, and it puts it, kind of gets back in. So this has to do with the idea of pushing onto a stack and popping from a stack. Something maybe you're familiar with, depends on your coding experience. But you think of a stack as something the last in, first out. So I'm going to do now, just by push D, that. Then I'm going to do, and you can stack these up. I can't think of a real good reason that we would ever really do this much. Sometimes though, you're writing a script and maybe that the user or the system's in a particular folder for a particular reason as its working directory. And you want to put the person back there, but you have no idea what folder it is. That's why push D and pop D are there. But notice that I push D backslash, then I push D Windows, and I'm in the Windows folder. When I pop D the first time, it pops back to the last thing I pushed D from, and when I pop D again, if it ever comes up, it gets me back there. And pop D, when you already have popped everything, just leaves you where you are. Okay, so a couple of little tidbits. They are covered in this video, but just when I grade these assignments, the ones that kind of get either overlooked or forgotten how to do from the command line are those two. All right, so I think that's enough. I'll stop now. Good luck. Keep in touch. Bye-bye.